This segment of the Bass Kayak and Beers podcast is supported in part by Douglas Outdoors, serious rods for serious anglers. Go to douglasoutdoors.com and check out their new lineup of Era rods that retail under $100. Norsk Lithium, the lithium battery that you need is just a click away. Go to norsklithium.com and check out some of the lightest lithium batteries in the market with the best warranty in the business. Mariner Sales, located in the heart of the DFW Metroplex, Mariner Sales has the largest inventory of kayak and kayak accessories in North Texas. You can also shop online at marinersales.com. What is going on, everyone? Welcome once again to the Real Life on the Bass Kayak and Beers podcast. As always, it's your boy Armando. Today we have a great guest, Eric Goodson. You may know him on social media as, Atypical Outdoors. I love his brand of fishing. His kind of like off the grid river fishing. So we're going to be talking a lot about that in our episode. You know, what to take in consideration if you're looking to do a river float and go fishing, and also get to know Eric a little bit. If you haven't followed him, go follow him on social media. I think it's Atypical Outdoors, but I'll let him plug in his social media. Really interesting. I really like it. I've mentioned this on the podcast. You know, I try to emphasize having people on the podcast that I enjoy their content and the scenery, the shots are on the videos. It's really cool. It's I really like it, and I really enjoy living vicariously through his social media account, especially when it comes to river fishing, which is something I don't get to do a lot here where I live in Texas, but I wish I could do a little bit more. It's funny how, you know, when we started this off, and I know a lot of you can relate on this, we started off maybe with a little small brand kayak, like maybe a Pelican. I started with an Ascend 12T. And then we started moving up and getting a bigger, more expensive kayaks and adding this and adding that and making it a lot more, not difficult, but a lot more complicated than it should. And then there comes a time, and you let me know, the guys that are watching and girls are watching, listening. Have you ever had that moment where you realize, man, I wish I could simplify a little bit more? Like, I've gone all this with the kayak, the pedal, the paddle, or the motor and the fish finder and all the electronics. And they're like, man, I feel like go back and do a little bit more simpler stuff. I think we all go through that. I think we go through a process where we buy a cheap kayak and then we start moving up to a more expensive kayak. And then there comes a point where you like want to go back to not necessarily a cheap kayak, but just like a simpler kayak and do river floats and creek floats and all that. So that's basically what the episode is going to be about. Before we get into the episode and I invite Eric on the show, I do want to let you know, for those that live in the DFW Metroplex or in Texas, February 7th, I'm going to be at Mariner Sales with Cameron Smith. And we're going to be having a seminar. It's going to be about an hour. There's going to be food and drinks. It starts at 11, the meet and greet. And then at 12, we're going to start the seminar. And it should go on for like an hour and 30 minutes. And then we're going to also have giveaways. We're going to have gift cards. We're going to do product giveaways. I think there's going to be some Yak Attack products. There's going to be some gift cards for Mariner Sales. So if you can and you want, go to Mariner Sales February 7th. I think that's a Saturday. We're not going to be there to promote a product or get you to buy something. We're going to be there to talk about how to get started with kayak fishing. I am not an expert kayak fisherman, but I've done this enough to know what mistakes I've made where I spent too much or bought things that I shouldn't needed to buy, or things that I regret not buying earlier. So even though we're not trying to sell you a product, what we're trying to get you is to understand what you're getting into if you're looking to get into kayak fishing without spending too much, without burning yourself out, and hopefully saving you some money. So if you want, February 7th at Mariner Sales, Go check it out. We're going to be there from 11 to around 2. Again, we're going to have food, drinks. The seminar is going to be an hour 30 minutes. We'll have a Q&A section at the end, and there's also going to be drawings. So you may be able to win some cool Yak Attack products or some nice gift cards for Mariner sales. So be there or be square. And I know that sounds kind of corny, but let's end it with that and bring in our guest for today, Mr. Eric Goodson. How you doing, my man?
Doing well. How about you, man?
Pretty good, man. I started following your account not that long ago, and I like I said on the intro, I love accounts that kind of bring the experience to the real. I don't like accounts that are trying to sell me anything. I don't like, or that's predominantly trying to sell you anything. Although I know with social media, sometimes you have to plug in. I have to plug in my sponsors, as anybody that's been watching or listening to the podcast can tell on the intro. But your content is really full of just the journey. Right. Like it's really, I think it's emphasizes like the off the grid kayak fishing style of fishing that you do, which is just beautiful sceneries, having that what is the word that I'm looking for, like having that moment with your friends where you are just having fun, relaxing and catching fish. So with that being said, tell me about your social media and about you, how you got into kayak fishing and what drove you to, do this style of fishing.
Yeah, it's a pretty funny story. One of my good friends invited me out to go kayak fishing, and I've never been in a kayak. I really wanted to try out a kayak, and when I got out there, man, he borrowed one. It was a super small kayak, man, and I was so unstable, and I felt so awkward. Like my first time getting the kayak, it's like, how do I cast? How do I paddle and maintain everything else? It was like, it's just like 10 things going on at once. I don't like it. But I continued to try to fish, and we got close together. He had a big Hobie, and I flipped, man. My first time ever in a kayak, I flipped and capsized and lost like 3 rods and everything else.
Oh, man.
So it was rough. And at that point, I was like, you know what, man? Like maybe kayak fishing is not for me. This is not fun flipping and losing everything. Then I met a good buddy named Charles, and he took me out again in a more stable, wider kayak, one that was more fit to fish out of. And slowly I progressed into liking kayak fishing because I was a bank fisherman for the longest, man. That is all I did. And through Charles, man, I got more comfortable on the kayak, and he took me out to the river, man. And after that, it was all said and done, man. Like I was hooked on the river. Like, seeing the scenery, seeing animals, going to places that I've never seen before.
And it's cool because your social media shows your passion for it. You even wrote an ebook, which is the title of this podcast episode, which is Beyond the Bend. And we'll get into that because I do want to talk about not just your social media, but also like your experience on it and what can you share with people that are looking to get into river fishing, which is, I think it's completely different. I wish we had more rivers like that area where you live. You live in Georgia, I think you mentioned,
Yep.
right?
Georgia.
So I haven't been to Georgia since I was probably like 12 years old. My parents, we were driving up from upstate New York down to Disney World. I must have been like 10 years old. And we stopped at a place in Georgia called Magnolia Gardens, I think it was. It's kind of like a swamp. I remember seeing gators and everything, and they had a petting, so it was beautiful. But we don't get that much river fishing. Like I see Alex Rod in Tennessee with Dalton.
Oh yeah,
I know the guys in Central Texas like Manny Varela, skinny water boys fishing.
Oh, that's my homie.
Yeah. He does a lot, but here where I live, there's not that much for it, except maybe the Brazos River and a couple of other ones. But what drove you more to doing that style of fishing than going to maybe a lake or a pond?
Mm-hmm. Man, I got spoiled, man. I have noticed from fishing like ponds and stuff like that, like I would get tired of fishing the same spot over and over and over. I notice how you progress sometimes as an angler fishing the same place over and over. But I was drawn into going to new places, exploring, and I was always captivated going to new rivers because every river is a little bit different. And it's weird with river fishing. Sometimes you can fish a mile straight down a stretch of river, and the next 3 miles past that, it could look like a whole totally different river. And the title of the book, Beyond the Bends, I named that because I feel like a kid sometimes on the river because I'm always looking to see like what's behind the next bend because the river always changes.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think that's a lake is pretty much a lake. I know the levels change just like a river,
Hmm.
but it's like you said, there might be what used to be like maybe just flat gravel, all of a sudden maybe full of debris from previous years and stuff like that. So the river is always changing, right? You can see it kind of eroding and reshaping over time. And I think that's cool because a lot of places where you thought you must like, oh, there's something a riprap over here that fish might be looking to, either spawn or just use it as a staging area. Might not be there next year, might not be there a week from now.
Yeah. If a big storm system comes through, that
Yeah.
whole nice spot you like fishing, you can come back and it could be like silted over. And you're like, that's the best spot on the river. And it's now gone.
What do you like to target? What type of bass or species, or maybe even subspecies of bass, do you generally target where you usually do river fishing in
Yeah.
Georgia?
The bulk of our fish that we catch in my general area is going to be the Alabama spotted bass. They're mean, man. They're aggressive. I mean, it wouldn't be a surprise if you catch an Alabama spotted bass around like 19 inches. We catch them up to 21 sometimes. But also, we have a really cool fish called a shoal bass.
Mhm.
A shoal bass is almost like a smallmouth bass. It loves the rapids, but its mouth is bigger than a smallmouth, and it has like stripes on it.
Oh, nice, cool.
Mhm.
Um, how did you started? I know how you started, but how did you progress as an angler? What sort of things you started doing? Whether it's how do you utilize your kayak, or what baits did you use when you started, and how have you evolved into either utilizing your kayak now, positioning, or new baits or new techniques that you're doing now that you wouldn't have done when you started?
Yeah, one of the funnier things is when I first started, man, all I threw was a worm. I was a tried and true worm guy. Give me a blight trick worm, man, and I would throw that thing every single day, especially coming up in pond fishing. That was my go-to. Give me a black worm, Texas rig, and I'm golden. But I wanted to catch bigger fish. So the process happened where I started throwing the chatterbait. And I caught so much better fish on a chatterbait on average. I mean, you can catch a big fish with a worm, but the
Hmm.
chatterbait produced bigger, bigger bites and better fish for me. And then I started going down a tunnel, and then I found swim baits. I tried the HUD, and I absolutely sucked with the HUD, man. Like I was just getting stuck in the bottom of the lake or in the pond. But I found the glad baits and swim baits, well, glad baits and a swimmer. And I fell in love with those because it's a lot of subsurface action. You can see when
Yeah.
a fish comes up and eat it. And it's just a super exciting moment.
Is it the thing that I always have with swim baits and people that have listened to my podcast, and whenever the subject comes of underrated, overrated,
Hmm.
me personally, because I'm not good with the swim bait. I always think
Yep.
like swim bait, a glide bait, it's overrated. I can't catch it, but that's just me. Like
Hmm.
there are guys out there like you and girls that just they would you swear by a swim bait as being the most underrated bait because you guys know how to use them. So,
Hmm.
how do you utilize a swim bait or glide bait that maybe typical angler doesn't?
Yeah. And I would say sometimes it's seasonal. I mean, don't get me wrong, you can catch a fish on a swim bait now without live scope, but the odds of fish being quite as active and aggressive kind of goes down a little bit more. For me, that bait really does really well, especially in the river from like May until like October. It's a really amazing bag, man. And the biggest thing is I just don't randomly go down the bank like throwing the swim bait. Like it's very certain areas where I target. Whether I'm gonna give you an example, if I'm on the river and it's a large stump, I'm gonna throw in front of the stump, kind of work my bait parallel to it, or throw behind a stump. If I come up to a big boulder, I throw it in front of a boulder, behind the boulder in an eddy where the slow water is at. So I'm actually going through targeting certain areas, and I won't waste my time on other areas. And one of the coolest things about the river, and this goes for a pond as well, if I have subsurface wood that may have like 2 feet, water above it, I work the glide bait right above the wood, and this fish will come up and try to destroy it. If they don't eat it, also you can come back and throw a fluke or a worm and follow up and sometimes catch them that way as well too.
That's cool. By the way, Skinny River Tom said, from YouTube says, "Sup, folks? New kayak angler trying to figure out this stuff. I'm also big swim glide bait fan." Tom, if you have, I'm assuming it's Tom, your first name. If you have any questions, feel free to put in the comment section. We'll try to get them answered. One of the things with river fishing now, you on my Instagram account, I'm doing a little bit more content of bank fishermen because I think that's, I don't know. It's first of all, it's something I like to do.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not gonna post stuff that I don't like to do. So I like to do bank fishing, go back to my roots. But I've noticed those types of reels get more attention.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because there's a lot of people out there, whether it's on a kayak or bank, that are love to fish on creeks and rivers. And some of the things that I noticed is as I'm getting more involved in that now, and not as much as doing it on lakes like I've been doing it over the last 5 years. One thing that caught my eye is that, like, with a chatterbait, because I don't usually use a swim bait, especially anything that has a treble hook when I'm on shallow creeks. But
Mm-hmm.
if I see a laydown that's, like you said, like just a foot or something around a foot, 2 foot from the surface, a lot of times it's just like having that chatterbait come up around it and just letting it drop, and you get so much bites with that. But one thing that I've noticed is, especially this winter, what in summer on clear water, you can see a lot of bass just floating
Mm-hmm.
around, spread out. I notice in winter, there's hardly any bass. There's always gonna be that like the resident bass that
Yeah.
is gonna stay full-time creek. But I think the majority of the population goes down to the main rivers and lakes that those creek feed. Now, again, I'm talking about a creek. You're more of a river fisherman. For river fishing and creek fishing, is there like something you figured out in as the season progress that shows you where are they moving within each season?
Um, Seasonal, I would say this time of year on the rivers, I typically like to fish areas where you have moving water and
Mhm.
then it empties out into like a pool or
Yeah.
deeper water. I want a little bit of flow into it. I don't want it completely stagnant, but I want flow, and then where it opens up into a bigger pool. And in those areas, I love throwing moving baits, but I may go to something like a jig or like a worm so I can work the bottom water column. And I'm fishing a good bit slower, almost like a lake fisherman would do, but I'm doing that on the river. And then I'll give you an example. Is one side of the river is deeper than the other side of the river. I'm focusing typically on the deeper side of the river, especially if it has like boulders or whatnot that may heat up a little bit quicker.
That's what I've noticed as well. Like in winter, I think they're more prone to schooling,
Mm-hmm.
but they're going to be in like deeper parts of the river or creeks rather
Mm-hmm.
than being like spawning season. You can see them up, like you can see their fins, their
Yep.
dorsal fins out of the water. That's pretty cool. One of the in For example, on lakes, I've noticed that on winter they'll either go deep because they have that luxury, maybe on a creek or river. They don't have the luxury of going 20, 30 feet deep, depending on the type of river we're talking about. But they also get up shallow where there's like rocks, especially like white rock that's put there because of a dam or to, manage erosion, or standing timber or boat ramps. All of those hard surfaces, either man-made or natural, that kind of hold the heat on winter.
Mm-hmm.
Um, does that is something that you notice as well in rivers? Are they more? I guess the question that I'm going to ask: do you feel like the bass are going to be more prone to moving water in winter, or more towards even calm water, but something that's going to radiate heat, like laydowns or rock piles or stuff like that?
Yeah, I think laydowns and rock piles definitely matter. But I think if you find those atoms in like those deeper pools, sometimes then you're in the money spot. And unfortunately, sometimes with river fishing, you can cover a lot of water during winter, and like you said, the fish usually school up more. It may be a mile or two where you hardly get no bites, but then you find like the jackpot area, and
Yeah.
they're there, and like you better kind of like focus on them in that particular area. Tell you the most oddest thing that I realized recently with me and my buddy. over like 5 or 6 trips this winter has been whenever the sun came out, the bike turned on. And then when the clouds came up, the bike would slow down. And like that's so odd because typically in summer it's the reverse. Like when the clouds
Yeah.
come out, hot water bikes is amazing. But in winter, when we had those time frames when the sun came out, they were on fire. And then the bike would just stop when the clouds came out.
That is so interesting because I've noticed that on lakes too. Like for example, one of my favorite lakes in winter is Joe Pool Lake, which a lot of people don't like here in Texas, or at least in DFW Metroplex. They call it Joe Poop Lake. But in winter, there are some areas where the boat ramp is, where there's a lot, especially if it goes to the, and I'm giving out more information probably that I would want to, but Joe Pool Lake really doesn't hold any tournaments, so I'm not giving the juice on tournaments.
Okay.
But if you go to Joe Pool Lake, for example, there's going to be a huge, on the southern ramp, there's going to be a huge flat area that has a lot of white rock. And in winter, on sunny weather, the top water bite is on fire. My guess, and I'm not a marine biologist, my guess is that sun kind of starts heating up, bringing energy to all that white sand and white rock, and because it's shallow, it tends to warm up. You'll see on your fish finder, it'll be 2 or 3 degrees warmer, and that may not sound like a lot, but it does make a huge difference, I feel like, for bass. And it's like exactly the opposite of summer.
Right.
Like on summer, they're not going to be in those huge flats. Like you might find them occasionally, but they're not going to be stacking over there because it's going to be super warm. It's usually in the back of coves where there's not a lot of moving water. So it's interesting that you mentioned that. That, I guess, whether it's a river or a creek or a lake, it's still very similar. I think the main difference between a lake and a river is just the moving water aspect of it. That, it's going to give you, it's going to be more oxygenated water, and I don't know if that's the right term, or it's going to be cooler water if it's on summer. But that's pretty cool, man. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. We got Tom says asking where, let me highlight that comment. Where does atypical fish as a river obsessed angler? I'm soaking this is all up. So I'm guessing asking where are you from? You mentioned that on the intro, Georgia, right?
Yeah, I'm in Georgia, and I fish from up in the mountains down to more the flat areas in Georgia that we have, more like the coastal plains. So I kind of fish all over Georgia, sometimes Tennessee, sometimes Florida as well.
One thing that is always interesting to me living in Texas is like everything is like so far away, like 4, 5, 10 hours away, and I'm still in Texas, but I keep forgetting every other state, maybe outside of California. It's like you'll drive 2 hours, you might have crossed 3 states, especially up in the Northeast, right? So for you, like how far away are other states, like neighboring states like Florida? I think Alabama shares, Alabama, Tennessee.
So Alabama, 3 hours, Tennessee, 2.5 to 3, and Florida is a decent drive. It's like probably at least 5 hours for me.
Go ahead.
But I was like, but Florida fishing, man, like it can be crazy. I mean, a big bass, potential redfish, snook. So I'll make the drive.
What is to you? What's your like? All right, I'm willing, not for a tournament, but just for like fun fishing. What's the farthest you be like? I'm willing to get up at wee hours in the morning and drive this many hours for this body of water
for a day trip.
Yeah,
2 hours and like 45 minutes. That's the longest we did.
Oh yeah, and what's your favorite body of water that you're like willing to? I'll do the drive for this place no matter what.
I can't tell a river, man, but
all right, the general area. I respect that, by the way.
Let's see, North Georgia, for striper, and Tennessee. Like we've been chasing muskie. Well, actually, last year we chased muskie, and that was a blast, man. I actually catch a muskie in a kayak was pretty fun.
Muskie on a kayak. Also, they're that further down. I always think of muskie being something like really upstate, like really up north, like I don't know, New York, Ohio, and all that area.
Yeah, but you can catch them in Tennessee.
Yeah, cool.
Yep.
Have you gone for like sturgeon? Like I know I'm not familiar where they live, but I know that's a little bit further south than I'm assuming.
Hmm. I want to catch a sturgeon. I never caught one yet, and I want to catch a giant alligator gar too. That's high up on my list.
Oh, you got to come to Texas then. We got you covered.
Y'all got
Oh
them.
yeah, we got some big gars, man. It's crazy. That's pretty cool. I've always been interested in sturgeon. Not that long ago, I read a story about this. I think it was either the mom or the little girl, maybe both, like a huge sturgeon. Like I couldn't believe how that prehistoric looking fish just jumps out of the water. And they're like 10, 15 foot long. And I think they're when they scared, I guess they jump out of the water, and this beast jumped out of the water. There was a lady with her daughter, I think it was, if I remember the story well. And they jumped up and landed on the kayak, and I think either or both lost their lives with of that incident.
Oh
And
shoot,
so I was like, wow, that is crazy. I've never
they're
even
huge.
didn't even know that could happen.
They're a dinosaur.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. Like they're beautiful fish too, but it's like really interesting. I've heard that we have them in Texas below the but it's a different type. I guess there's different species. One of them is a little bit smaller. So the smallest of it, I've heard they have it below the dam in Texoma. I've never
Mhm.
fished for them, but I've read somewhere in that they have it. Well, that's cool, man. Let's talk about your book or your ebook, Beyond the Bend. What inspired you to write that?
I would
And what's it about
say
too?
yeah. It's actually about safety on the river. It's about river fishing to give people a better learning curve on what took us. Godly man, took us 3, 4, 500 miles of river fishing and just all this time, experience, and money, just to kind of help people out. Because there's so many things when you first start river fishing that you don't know and you kind of take for granted. So just to help people out, keep them safe, and give them a head start on fishing the river, so it's not such a big undertaking.
What are some of the let's start with safety. What are some of the safety tips that you recommend for people that, let's say somebody, hey, I've never done river fishing, I want to do a river float. What do they need to know before they start doing this?
Yeah, the first thing is having a life jacket. Like you absolutely need to have a life jacket
Yeah.
on the river because things happen. You're dealing with moving water. You got strainers with your trees. You can actually just go into a tree with the flow. Um, so many things can happen on the river. You can be a great fisherman. I mean, you can be a great swimmer, but when you fall out, you can hit your head on the rock or anything like that.
Yeah.
Um, Next thing is like just doing a little bit of homework, mapping out like how long potentially your float may be when you first start. If you're going with a buddy, I would really recommend going with somebody at first and not going solo, because things do happen, man, out on the river. Typically, we do a lot of put floats where we put in at one spot and then we float down to another spot. Um, and the other biggest thing that we didn't start doing to about 2 years into river fishing was actually checking the water levels
Mm.
on the river. In the past, we would just look at it and say, hey, man, it hasn't rained in about 2 weeks. The river's clear. We should be golden. But now we do a lot more homework and, check into water levels. Um, is the river high? Is the river low? Because fish react differently based upon the water level.
That's interesting that you mentioned that. Actually, somebody that just joined the live show as a viewer, I'm not going to say the names, but he went with another buddy of ours to do a river float. He told me, he's like, hey, we're going to do a river float up in, I think it was the Brazos River.
Mm-hmm.
It's like one day things like, oh, are you like, walking it back? Because it's too shallow to kind of navigate it back. It's like, no, we just gonna, we'll get picked up at Rochelle's, which is the place they pick you up. You can drop off your car or they can pick you up, whichever. And I was like, I don't think you can do that in a day. He's like, yeah, we can do it in a day. Man, I got a call almost midnight. Like, yeah, you were
Oh,
right. We can't do it in a day. It's like, dude, I told you. What were you thinking? But
yeah.
it's like, yeah, you really need to figure it out. Because I was like, because I never done it, and I was like, oh, maybe he's right and I'm wrong. So I don't want to tell him. But either way, I couldn't. I said like, hey, man, I can't make it today. But it's like, I'm pretty sure you need more than one day. It's like, oh, no, it's just we can do it in one day. We already looked at it. It's only 10 miles. I'm like, doesn't sound right. But I was like, all right, we'll have fun. And then yeah, sure enough, we got a call. Oh, and there's a whole story about that.
Oh, trust
Uh,
me, we have stories, man. Um, I would say like when I first started out, I fished the river a whole lot slower. I wanted to hit every rock, every
Yeah.
tree. So when I first started out, our floats was like 5 to 6 miles. So far now, man, in one day without a motor, I've done 13 and a half, 14 miles in one day on a float. That's about long as I've done before. That's like a 12, 13 hour float.
Now that you mentioned that, you mentioned your kayak motors and all that. Let me ask you about that.
Hmm.
What kayaks? I mean, you can mention a brand name if you want. You can mention model. I don't care. But what kayaks? What should people look for? It says like, hey, I want to get a kayak and I want to do river floats. What kind of kayak? What kayaks you recommend for somebody that's going to be doing that exclusively, or like the majority of their fishing is going to be involved around rivers and creeks? What's the best kayak for that, or top three if you want?
Top three. Okay, cool. The Bonafide RVR, which is
Hmm.
made for rivers. It's probably one of the more stable river kayaks that I've been in before. A little bit heavier than some of the other river kayaks, but easy to rig, super stable, especially a little bit more of a bigger guy trying to get on the river and kayak fish, and you want to be comfortable. Number two would be probably the Crescent Shoaling.
Mm.
That one is not quite as stable, but you can move it around and maneuver really well in the river. Easy to paddle, and you still can stand too. I haven't been in this one. A lot of my buddies love it, but the U10 I heard really
Oh, the
great
new,
things
yeah, yeah,
about.
yeah.
Yep, really stable as well. A little bit wider. May take a little bit more work paddling, but all three of those kayaks you can motorize if you have a motor as well. And one thing I wanted to touch base too, if you don't have a buddy to kayak on the river at first, excuse me, you can do a 1 point entry where you actually start off going up, paddling up the river, and then you just float back down to
Hmm.
where you started at. So that's like
That's
a
a good
one
point.
point entry. Yep.
Yeah, usually when I go to Brazos, if depending on the water level, I have to like walk it up. And now with
Yep.
the PA14, I have it. That's one of the things, like I mentioned in the intro. There comes a time where you like, oh, you want to get all these kayaks and all the bells and whistles, and then there'll be a time where you're like, I wish I could go back to where things
Hmm.
were simpler. And that's when you get your second kayak. You got your lake kayak, and then you have your river kayak, which is the one you're
100%.
going
I
to
was just
use.
about to say that. Yep.
Yeah.
Because they
So
serve
another
different purposes.
question we have from Tom says, any safety tip for someone dropping into rivers with no info on them, very remote areas? I did a lot of exploring last year, and it got dicey. I hold this U10 upstream and float it back. So what advice you have for that?
I would try to do a lot of work. I use On Water. You can also use Google Map. I stay on those two apps a ton, like just doing tons of research, looking at where the shoals. If you have a shoal, which is like a mini rapid, I kind of look at where they're at on the map, um, and kind of pick out the places where I want to fish. The Rogue strap is a really good device to have because you can pull your kayak up, hold on to it, then you can also kind of put it around you while you fish, and the kayak is kind of behind you. And probably the most important thing is telling somebody before you go where you're gonna be at,
Yeah.
um, what time you're gonna start, and what time you should be back. That way, if it's something goes wrong, they know, hey, he should have been back by now. Send the Coast Guard, and you just want to be safe. Another thing too, well, is like the little knives the NRS makes. For instance, if you have like a rope get wrapped around you, you can cut it away, and if they have a blunt tip, so you're not gonna stab yourself. And if you ever get tangled up, you have the ability to cut yourself. Because a lot of times as fishermen, we have everything tethered, and if
Yeah.
you capsize, you can get caught up in your own like tether. So having that like little NRS knife will help out a lot too.
Yeah, I think Jeff Little is the one that usually has it like on the chest. Let me pull that
Yep.
back a little bit for those that are watching. He has it on his chest, where he just pulls up. I know it. Like I used to do a lot of scuba diving when I was in Puerto Rico, and you would have it on your ankle. You would
Okay.
always have that knife on your ankle. They always say you have to have that knife. You never know when you're going to get caught up in something, some fishing line or something. And I mean, you're totally right on that. I feel like a lot of times. Now, granted, I don't do a lot of river fishing, but for lake fishing, kind of dynamic is different, right? So if you're doing offshore fishing and you capsize, I don't tether anything. I've seen videos of people, oh, you got this tether. I don't tether anything. And I recommend people, again, on a lake,
Hmm.
don't tether anything. Because if you're in 20 foot of water, like you're trying to flip that thing, now you got your crate tethered, your rods tethered, your everything else. Plus, I'm assuming you have a fish finder, you have all that. Good luck trying to flip that thing. It's like nothing that you have on your kayak is worth your life. I get it. River fishing is a little bit different, especially if you're going to be fishing shallow rivers. You're not maybe that worried about getting, um, you know, drowning, although it is still a strong
Oh
possibility.
yeah, it is.
Uh, but and I get it. You get to with moving water, you might flip a lot, and it may be very expensive to replace a rod every time you fall or your black box, or whatever you have on your kayak. But that's always something with me. And I always say, is like, man, I personally I don't like tethering anything. Now, again, I don't do
Right.
river fishing. Maybe if I'm doing river fishing and I know that I'm gonna more likely to get capsized than that on a lake, maybe I'll consider it. But that's being aware of that. I think is very very important.
You're right, and I try not to tether anything as well too, because it can get you as
Yeah,
well. And that's another thing, as far as equipment. Typically with the river fishing, man, the max I usually have is 4 rods. A lot of times I go out with 3 rods. Um, I don't carry a lot of things. Typically, river fishing, once you figure out what they want, you got it pretty dialed. And also, if you do capsize a flip, you don't want 6 combos floating down the river. They don't stop most of the time. A lot
yeah,
of times they keep going. So you're going to lose them.
yeah. One thing that I wanted to touch on what type of rods you recommend for river fishing, because that may be a little bit different because of the dynamics of it. But before I get into that, I wanted to still stay a little bit more on the safety side of things. When you are, I remember going to a seminar where they kind of explain what to look for when you're going down rivers. You get so focused on catching fish that you're not, if you're not used to doing river fishing, there are some red flags that you may not recognize. With your experience, what are some red flags that maybe if you're not never done it before, you might not think nothing of it, but that may give you an indication that beyond that bend, there may be something lurking that could be dangerous to you.
Yeah, probably the biggest one that most people mess up on is dams.
Mhm.
Dams will kill you if you don't watch out sometimes for them, especially low hanging dams because they have hydraulics. Like if you
Yeah.
go in them, you just keep spinning, you can't get out. Another one is shoals or rapids. Typically, you'll hear them before you get to them, and also if they're really big, you'll see like the horizon, and you like, hey, I don't see where the rest of the river is at. Like, what's going on here? At that point, you may want to pull over to the side and kind of look and see, like, all right, we're not going to be able to get past that. We may have to port and go around it. Porting, this means like dragging your kayak like down around the river before you go down a big shoal or rapid. Always make sure you look at it before you go down. And one of the more simpler ones is like a strainer. And that could be as simple as a big tree I lay down in the river. When you're in the river, you're always moving. You may not
Hmm.
think about it. You may hook a fish right before that tree. You're going to actually coast into that same tree. So you really have to be mindful. Like if you hook a fish in heavy current, you're gonna still move with that fish while you're fighting it, and you could end up on the river embankment, right next to a tree.
Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah, I think I've experienced some level of that, but again, Tom, with the questions, and I appreciate it, Tom. Keep them coming. Again, anybody watching or listening, if you have a question, put it in the comment section. We'll try to get them answered. It says, as a musky kayak angler, fishing standing up anchoring spooks me. I'm running a power pole and an anchor wizard. When should I not anchor? That is a great question, Tom. Thank you.
Yeah, it is. It gets very hairy and heavy current. You actually feel your kayak shaking, go sideways, and I mean, with that leverage, you can flip very easy. So I try to anchor outside any current because you can even get situations where your anchor is actually stuck in the rocks and you can't get it out, and you got to cut it off and leave it. So try to anchor outside the current. Say, for instance, if you have slight current on one side of the river and then heavy current on the other side, I anchor on the outside, where it's light current fish into the seam where the heavy current is at, or either you can anchor in an eddy. An eddy is where you have calm water kind of with current on the outside of you. If you look at it like leaves or foam, it'll be still and it won't move in that section, or the leaves will be all in that one general area. That's where there's no current at. So I try to anchor in very mild current or either no current. Anchoring can be dangerous and sketchy in the river.
That's a good point. I wanted to ask you also about the anchor because I think it matters. I think you can't just, hey, I just anchor for my kayak. I've seen guys tell me, and I think was it Scott Bucher the ones talked about this, but I can't remember. Maybe it was Jeff Little, that they have what they call the chain anchor. So they'll have like, I don't know, some type of like closed hook. What do you call that for? What the ones they use for rock climbing? Forgot the name of that.
Carabiner.
Carabiner. I know it started with a C. So they have a carabiner, and they'll add like 3 foot long, heavy chains depending on the amount of current. And a lot of it has to do with you actually doing your homework and checking the apps, the river apps that show you the flow of water, the release of water in the upper river dams and all that. And based on that, they'll say, okay, well, there's this amount of, water being released. Current's going to be around this. I should have an anchor that weighs this. So I remember, I think it was Jeff Little. It would have like a carabiner, and then they would add, depending on that, they would add chains to it because, as they explain it, chains are less prone to getting snagged. Like you can't use like a boat anchor, those that look like a little, like those hooks, because once that digs in between rocks, there's no way of getting that out.
No, it's stuck. And then you lean in sideways to try to cut it out.
Yeah.
And you can flip over.
That's where having, like you mentioned, like a knife like the NRS to cut. And again, that is so important. The blunt on tip is so important. You can just get stabbed so easily. Especially when things go sideways, it goes sideways real quick. And you're not always thinking right. And you're very prone to getting, to causing harm to yourself or trying to serve yourself at the same time. So that is another reason why you should have something. I'm not promoting an RS because I'm not associated by them, but having a knife and cut and have a blunt end is very, very, very important, especially if you're going to be dragging the chain. And I think Tom was mentioning I run the drag chain in front and the power pole in the back in the river with zip ties to break off if we get sketchy. That's another thing. Okay. A lot of people use zip ties to hold their anchor because if it gets bad, you can just jerk on it real hard and break. And so that's another thing. Like I made the mistake once where I got zip ties, but I got the really strong zip ties. And you're not going to be able to break that off. So if you're going to get those zip ties, what do you recommend, Eric? Like, and again, this is zip ties that are meant to break off if your anchor is no way of getting it out.
Yep. I would say I don't have quite as much experience with the zip tag, so I really can't speak on it. I don't have an answer for you on that one. I just try to be very careful with anchor systems because it can really go sideways very quickly with anchors in the river.
Do you typically anchor, or is that something that you kind of like unless it's really like needed?
I anchor sometimes. I use the Anchor Wizard. Have you seen those before?
Yeah.
And a lot of times with the river, speaking of the book, Beyond the Bends, a lot of times when I go on the river and we'll get to actually a big bend and we'll get out of the kayaks and kind of wade and fish those bends, give them a shallow end and kind of cast into the bends. Another kind of tip about the bends is a lot of times your fish are going to be in the front of the bend or at the very end of the bend, or if you have any like big rock structures along the bend too. So we'll actually hop out and fish the bend.
Yeah, I think that's pretty cool. And that you mentioned on this, I want to go back to that, like having that rope, and it's not just tying it. There's a rope system, right? Like where you have like a free loop that you go over your shoulder and your chest, and then you carabine the rope that's holding your kayak to that. And that's one of those little things that is until you actually on the river, you realize, oh, this would have been a great idea. I wish you would have thought of that.
Yeah, because your kayak, if not, you're holding on to it with one leg, trying to fish with the other one, especially if you're going upstream, because it's going to want to float behind you and everything too. And if you're dragging it down a shoal, it's nice to have something to hold on versus bending over in trying to stabilize your kayak while walking down like this moving water. It's a lot of things that go on at once when you're dealing with moving water.
And then there's also if you're fishing on a river that has like I know like the Brazos River underneath Lake Whitney. I love, but in summer because it's how do you call this? Uh it's kind of like not a power plant. It's one of those where you generate electricity. Forgot those. What's the name of that
Oh,
dam?
a hydroelectric dam?
Hydroelectric dam. Thank you. My English is escaping me today. Um, like that on summer, like Lake Whitney on summer, like I know at any point those alarms are gonna go off. And if I'm just like wade fishing, I need to get the hell out of there. Or if I'm on the kayak, I need to prepare for that water that could
Those
be,
water.
depending how much water they're releasing, they could be a big displacement of water in a very short amount of time. But that's also something I think you have to be aware of. If you're fishing a river, those hydro plants, hydroelectric plants, you have to, especially on summer where people are running the AC and everything, and it's really hot here in Texas, you have to pay attention to them, which is different from one that's maybe there are some, some a lot of the lakes around here that are dam, um, they may just have an overflow where it's just if it rains too much, then the water just goes over. There's no release. It's just
Yep.
it'll stay up to a level, and if it goes beyond that level, it's just it'll go through the spillway. But if you have one of those dams, then you have to be very very aware even of the weather, not just where you are, but the weather north of where you are, and
Yep.
also that can if it's a hydroelectric plant if they're going to be releasing water.
Sometimes it's so funny. Sometimes by looking at your water levels, you can look on the map and you can see when the bump up occurs when they do the release. But also sometimes with certain fish and certain fisheries, it fishes better when they release versus when they don't release. So it's a lot of like work and research from a trial basis. When you're on the river, you start to find out, well, when they release, the fishing is better. When they don't release, it's kind of slow. So, and when they release, they stack up this way. When they don't release, they're like hatting. So it's super interesting sometimes how that all works.
And especially on like again, I go back to the Brazos because that's what we have here. Um, like for the example, the Brazos, you have like Possum Kingdom, and below it you have Grand Prairie. Now, if let's say Grand Prairie needs to release water because there's a lot of houses over there that like right at the edge of the lake, and they need to release water, then that draws the river down a little bit. So
Mm-hmm.
it's different, the release can be either way. It could be drawn down or it could be adding water from the dam above it, north of it. So when you talk about like that without, I mean, I don't want to spend the whole because this could be a whole episode, right? But in general, when you see a river that is being drawn down, in other words, the ramp at the south of the river is being open and the water levels are going down, how do you change your approach to water being drawn down from the river? Like what do you move? Do you change baits? Do you move from location? What do you look for?
Especially if it's like low and clear like that, everything has to be more precise. I have to hit my spots. The fish may be like tucked up, like right up against like some structure or lay down. I'm more cognitive and I think about like how clear, like if I'm using, example, sometimes I use full braid on the river. In those scenarios, I might have to actually lose like, like a 14-pound fluorocarbon line instead of using like a 30-pound straight braid. So I have to really hit my spots, and sometimes it becomes more of a game of finesse and having line is not so visible because the fish can get a little bit more finicky.
That's cool. And what about when the water is actually like, okay, let's talk about the opposite of that. The the dam at north from you is releasing more water, so the water level is going up. What other than the safety, but more focus on the fishing aspect of it? What do you look for, and what do you try to change?
So yeah, a lot of times with those situations, I may use something like a spinner bait. I may use my glad bait or a swimmer around like stumps and laydowns and stuff like that as well. A little bit more power fishing at that point.
Yeah, that makes sense because I figure there's more water released and there's more bait fish that are coming down that
Hmm.
may be disoriented and like what's going on, and then more opportunistic uh fish, predatory fish like a bass, maybe it's like, what, because they know, they understand, water's going up, that means food is coming
Let's
down
go.
the pipeline. Let's move in. It's feeding time, boys. So do you feel like, is there something in, like, do you look for eddies or places where bass are going to be now staging at, preparing for that flow, that of, that conveyor of food that's going to be coming down up from the river?
Yeah, definitely eddies, and like it's fun sometimes, especially in the summer. That time of year, they use like a chopo or whopper plopper. Like the fish are really aggressive and like riled up. Definitely fishing like eddies. Current seems right outside of the eddy, right by like the fast moving water. Kind of depends on the species of bass, like spotted bass. Largemouth can be a little bit more like in the slower water versus a spotted bass or a smallmouth can kind of be all over the place. But definitely, I like to fish the eddies a good bit. Right, I like to fish right behind boulders. A lot of times, fish head out there because there's no current behind them as well.
What about boat positioning? That's one thing that I always find interesting, because being that I don't have a kayak that's really ideal for river fishing, and it's a little bit harder to maneuver PA-14 on the river than
Hmm.
it is a Crescent or a RVR. So I'm more of like, I'm gonna keep things simple, right? But for you, what is an experienced avid angler? How do you use boat positioning? Like, are you trying to face upriver when you're looking at an eddy? You have an eddy where the fish are going to be staging at. Are you going to be fishing north of that or south of that?
It depends on how I'm fishing. Like if I'm just going up versus like actually floating down. But both ways, I kind of like to do more of a parallel approach versus fishing perpendicular all the way across the river. Almost like you're fishing a crankbait where you're kind of at like a 45-degree angle and I'm fishing sort of parallel towards the bank as well. So I can kind
Okay.
of like leapfrog each cast.
Interesting. That's
And
cool, man.
keeping the especially like a bigger bait like a chatterbait or a swim bait, keeping it more so in the strike zone. If I have most of the current on one side of the river and it's flowing more, that way that bait is kind of standing parallel to the juice.
That's cool. That's interesting.
Mhm.
That's so
It
much.
matters. And if you're actually the current's coming towards you and you have a big eddy, I mean, you can throw towards the end of that eddy and bring your bait all the way through the eddy back towards you.
Do you generally try to like imitate fish that are coming down river? So in other words, is your baits coming down river with you, or are you bringing your face? You typically bringing your baits upriver. What do you feel has more success? The fish going upriver or the fish going downriver, or your bait in this case?
I don't do it quite as much, but I feel like it's you can present it better going up the river. You kind of can surprise fish sometimes with your bait coming down the river. But a lot of times with most of my fishing trips, like we're floating down the river, so I'm bringing it back towards me. But if I'm on solo trips, I feel like sometimes I can surprise and sneak the fish a little bit more when I'm fishing upriver and bringing the bait down naturally with the current.
Cool. What type of equipment other than the kayak, but as far as rods and reels, is there a preferred rod and reel? Like, I think of when I do creek fishing here in the DFW Metroplex, I always think like I'm gonna get like short rods,
Mhm.
something that is gonna give me, because if sometimes there's you don't have to make long cast, right? So because typically river it's gonna have bends and everything, so it's not like in a lake, maybe you have like open space, you want to cover a lot of ground. So I don't need a really long rod, and also I am kind of like limit. I may be limited depending on the creek or the river with overhanging trees and all that. I need to be a little bit more precise with my cast. What do you feel are like? What is your favorite style of rod that you like to take that you feel makes a difference
Mhm.
on the river more than any other style?
Yeah, you kind of hit on a lot of things. Then, even going back to the kayak thing, what you're saying, the overhangs. A lot of times, our rod tubes are like slanted backwards. That
Mhm.
way, like they're not sitting straight up, because you actually will lose a rod in the trees
Yeah.
sometimes. but I have them slanted backwards. But honestly, man, take it with a grain of salt. I'm a lot different from most anglers on the river. I try to throw bigger baits, so because I'm looking for the bigger fishes that I can find on that river. But I use the medium heavy a lot, just like a lot of traditional fishermen, like a 7 foot medium heavy. Um, Another thing is with the river, you're always moving. So I have to have the ability to take up slack kind of quickly sometimes and drive the hook home. So typically I'm going out with like 3 rods. I have a medium heavy. Well, actually, I usually have 2 medium heavies. So I make this something like a spinner bait on one or a chatterbait. On the other rod, I usually have a Texas rig worm, which is a medium heavy or a jig. And then the other rod, I usually have like a swim bait. That's my 3 rods. And if it's slower, then I have like a spinning setup to where I can do more of a finesse approach, like a fluke or like a shaky head, something to that nature.
Do having a high speed reel helps you a little bit more? I know, like maybe you're battling fish in a current, which is different battling fish on
Hmm.
stagnant water like a lake.
Yeah.
So does having a more like a beefier style, like a slow reel that has more torque
Hmm.
helps you fight the fish with the current, or does having a high speed reel, which has less torque, help you more? Do you feel like there's a difference on it? Not that you couldn't use one or the other, right? You can use.
Yeah.
We're talking about. I don't want people to think, oh, you need to buy this reel because otherwise you can't get fish. That's not what we're saying. We're saying
Right.
like, as related to what the fish that you're targeting in the water condition. Do you feel like one reel has more of an advantage than another?
For me, it's the high speed. That way I can hit because you're always moving on the river. I can hit a spot, then I can reel in really quickly. And if it's a really good spot, I can make one more cast before I'm going down the river.
Hmm.
And sometimes with fish, they can be really strong in the river. That's one of the cool things about river fishing. Like they're fast, they're aggressive. I may, set the hook and the fish just flies upstream. And I actually have to reel in really fast to catch up while I'm floating downstream. So for me, high speed reels are really important. And even more important when I'm trying to work a glad bait, because I have to take the slack out of the bait to make it cut quickly. So I need, a high speed reel in that case, even more so.
That's interesting, and it totally makes sense. One thing that I think about, and maybe I'm don't want to over explain it, but I'll explain it a little bit for somebody that maybe didn't know this about high speed reels and low speed reels. Um, because I didn't know about it until I started buying it, and then I realized I bought more. I bought the wrong kind of reel. Again, it's not that you can use one reel for multiple
Yep.
purposes, right? But it's just about being more efficient. So one of the things is a high speed reel is like your really fast sporty car, right? It's going to
Hmm.
have high speed reel, but it's not going to have a lot of torque versus a more of a low speed, um, low gear reel is going to be slower, but what they do have is a lot more torque force. Now think about that as a diesel truck, right?
Yep.
It's not going to be as fast as a sporty car, but it's going to pull something out of where that's stuck, where
Yep.
a sports car can't do it. So when we think about that, I always think about, and I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just want to give
Hmm.
a perspective for those that are watching and listening that may not be familiar with this subject. It's like when I think of, well, you need to battle a fish on current, there's the advantage of the high speed wheel, which you kind of like went through it and makes completely sense. The counter argument to that is like, man, if you have to fight like a big striper or a big bass and you have a lot of current, that's where your low speed, low gear reel is really going to shine because it's going to give you that torque to get it out, especially if it's a big, strong fish. That's
Yep.
the argument to both. And I only mention that not to debate what you're saying because you're absolutely right. It's just so people have more perspective of what's the difference of what makes one what's the advantage and disadvantage, the pros and cons, as if you will, of each one.
Hmm. And one thing too, I feel like most people don't talk enough about river fishing is one of the most important things is like you got to be accurate and hit your spots on river fishing. Like you have to hit them. Like sometimes it has to be within 6 inches of a tree or a stump or a boulder, or you're not gonna catch the fish. And you have to not be afraid to put it in actually a lay down, like
Mhm.
super jig into. a laydown full of trees and current.
Yeah, that's a good point too. Tom mentions I like using a striker 4 on my river kayak just to check the depth when the water isn't clear. Like typically, that's a good subject. I personally don't even bother taking my fish finder when I'm on the river. But do you usually take your fish finder and
Mm-hmm.
do
I
you?
just use like the
Go ahead.
deeper unit, like the little deeper unit.
Oh yeah, I've seen that on your social media. Yeah.
Yeah, just mainly for what y'all saying, like the water temperature and the depth. Cause sometimes it's kind of surprising. Like you get by a boulder and the freaking boulder may be like 11 feet, and the rest of the river is like 2 or 3 feet. So it can be kind of interesting sometimes, and then you realize, well, that's why the fish were stacked up on this section of the river versus the other section of the river.
I've seen that deeper finder, and for me, a guy that fishes on lake,
Mm-hmm.
it's maybe not the ideal tool for it,
Yep.
but I can definitely see the value on it when we're talking about river fishing. Like you don't really want to be with a 12-inch screen with all the bells and whistles like a Garmin, a Lowrance, whatever it is, adding more weight to your kayak. But talk a little bit about that deeper for those that don't know about it. Like
Mm-hmm.
why is it such a valuable tool for you when you're out river fishing? And while you do that, I'll try to Google it to share the image on the
Yeah.
screen for those that are not familiar with it.
Yeah, for me, it's easy to deal with. You don't have a ton of wires, and doing river fishing, you're always bumping into trees, logs. You can just it attaches to your actual trike, and you
Mhm.
just put it inside your boat. And then when you get ready to fish again, you can put it back into the water, and it syncs up with your cell phone, and it has a reading that shows the depth, the water temperature, and also it can like chart fish as well. It's simple. It's out of the way when you need to be, and you don't have to worry about a transducer getting messed up. That's the only thing about the river. Nice equipment gets destroyed on the river.
Yeah.
I mean, whether it's
Tell
rods,
me
reels,
about it.
it gets dirty, grimy.
Let me share the screen. Again, I'm not trying to sell anybody on the deeper. I just think as I've gotten to know more about your social media, I see the value in that deeper app. So if you're out there, fishing on rivers, this may be a valuable tool. So let me just share it in case you're not familiar with it. So this is, I think I shared too much here. Actually, I want to go to this one. Is that the one that I'm supposed to be showing? Let me switch screens. I apologize, people. I'm not great at this. Let me look for the other image. Share screen. Why is it not coming up? Windows screen. I'm going to do entire screen. That's what I'm going to do. Nope, it's not working. I have to open the system. Good Lord. Here it is. All right, here we go. So this is the one that you use.
Mm-hmm.
So retails for $129, which is a fraction of a price of a a real. I don't want to see a real fish finder, but like your typical Lowrance and all that.
Yeah,
You view everything on your phone, right?
on the phone. Yep.
Cool. So that's pretty cool, man. How long have you been using it?
So now for about a year and a half or two.
What? How do you feel? Do you really feel like it's giving you an advantage? Like you feel like with it you're catching more fish, or not? Maybe just in the moment catching more fish, but actually learning. Like a lot of people tell me, like forward facing sonar, it's like, man, it's not just about catching fish. It's like the information that you are now previous to, like you can now see how fish are reacting to this color or this bait. So
Yeah.
that's that information that pays off long term.
It kind of gives me on the end of the trip, kind of knowing the reason why. Like, why are fish here? And I give you an example. Some of the rivers I fished are really stained. And man, you think you're in like 7 feet of water, and it's like 3 feet. And it's like, man, I thought this was super deep. And it's not deep at all. That's where it's probably the most useful for me. Like this monitoring some spots with depth.
Yeah. I know that Garmin makes, I think Tom was talking about it by like the Striker 4. I know that they
Mhm.
have window fishing. If you guys want to know more about those little smaller screen, like 4-inch screens, go check out Wendell Fishing's YouTube channel. He does a lot of breakdown of those. He's very familiar with it. And I think, again, I don't use that on a lake, but I think between that, you can choose between that or the deeper. Um,
Yeah.
tool that you're using. But I think, yeah, definitely you want to get something that's, not bulky, not heavy, that's not going to make it, it's not worth it's not worth it. It's like, yes, it's going to help you, but then you have to deal with all this weight and not just that battery. You have to add a battery to it.
Yep.
Where if with the deeper app, you don't have to add a battery to it. That's pretty cool, man. That's something you see. That's what we're talking about in the pre-recording. There's going to be some subjects that we'd go deep into that I was not expecting to talk to you about, but so that's one of them. And I'm glad you told me about the deeper, and I'm glad I watched it on your social media, because previous to that, I really thought it was like, oh, this is kind of gimmicky. But when I think about more and more about river fishing, I see the value in it.
Yeah, I think that's kind of where it stands at as far as that unit. I mean, for a lake, live scope, a really nice SAT scan, but like for a river, you don't need quite as much.
Yeah, that's true. What have we not covered about river fishing that we still talk about?
Let's see, we didn't talk about. I'll give you an example. Like the swim bait side of things on the river.
Yeah. So what do we? Well, I'll let you lead. Go ahead before I ask the question.
One of the bigger things as far as glad baits and swim baits on the river is all the baits don't perform the same. Like some baits will blow out, and that means they kind of go sideways and get kind of wonky and won't swim right because of the current pushes against the bait. For guys who are really kind of getting into swim baits and want to try it on the river, it's a couple I would like say that's actually pretty decent. The KGB resin, not resin, the KBG ABS one is a pretty good one. The Buka brand Trick Shad, the ABS one, the 6 inch is really cool. If you want to venture into a bigger one, which will require like more specialized equipment, the 8 inch is good as well. And also like the Sneaky Pete. Those 3 baits do actually really good in current, and they're not going to break the bank on you if you're looking to get into a glide bait for the river.
Do you have a preferred color? I know you have one that's kind of, what's the word I'm looking for?
The crazy color one?
Yeah, the one that's kind of like pinkish or something. It's like, man, that is a crazy pattern.
Yeah, that one's wild. I like shad a lot, like a silver-based bait. And bone. This is kind of, here's one. That's the Trick Shad from Bull Shad. Bone is a great color. It shows up really good in stained water, and also does well in clear water as well too.
Awesome. We have a question from Cam. Before we go into that question, I wanted to touch on something that I've noticed, and it's like this community within the community. And you were talking about how Manny Borrell is your boy and all that, and I see you got the guys and girls that love river fishing, also the guys and girls that love throwing a swim bait. And it's cool to see how you guys, like, doesn't matter what part of the state, just like you have your own community within the community, and it's a strong bond. Like, swim bait guys and river guys, they'll bond like any other. Like, lake kayak anglers that fish on lake like myself, I always like tournaments and stuff like that, and it's always like, don't share this information, stuff like that. But you guys and girls, man, you guys bond like more than any other group that I've seen on the outdoors.
It's cool to hear, man. I think the river guys are a little bit crazy. And the swim baits is kind of, I hate to say it, it's easier to throw the swim bait on the river than it is on the lake. Sometimes the fish are wild, they're kind of dumb sometimes, and there's times you'll have 4 fish chase after a swim bait. They don't see it that often. I know you said you're not as much confident in it, but if you go on, I have good things about the Brazo, but if you go on like a kind of a clear water, clear river, you can actually see your followers. It'll give you more confidence, and sometimes you'll see multiple fish fight over the swim bait.
Yeah,
pretty cool stuff.
I got to get more into it. But we have a question from Cam Smith. He says, what do you typically throw for stripers in the rivers?
That's a good question, Cam. What's up, Cam? I know Cam. As far as striper in the river, the Magnum Fluke is a really good one too, the big one, and also a bigger glide bait. So this is like a 9-inch glide.
That's a nice looking glide bait.
Yeah, and spotted bass, I've eaten this multiple, and it's 9 inches. They don't really care. But bigger glide baits, you can catch the striper on like a 7-inch glide bait, but 9 to 12 inches Magnum Flukes, and also jerk baits. But just be mindful, like you're gonna go on a ride if you catch one on a jerk bait. You have to be able to follow it down and
Yeah, you can't fight it.
overpower.
Yeah. I don't, man, I don't know. I have had the guts to throw like a jerkbait on the river. But
Yeah.
I mean, I guess it depends. But if there's a lot of moving water, like
Mhm.
man, that is like props to anybody that can land a striper on a river with a jerkbait.
That's the
Like
skills.
that's that's a ballsy call. I'm gonna say it because
Yeah.
it's such. I mean, you really, it's like of the hardest baits, the hardest fish to get on your kayak are the ones, now not mean catching it, I mean like once you hook into them, the ones that the highest or the lowest hookup ratio, it's got to be a jerk bait. Like it's, for me at least, maybe I'm doing it wrong, but man,
Yeah.
jerk baits is like I catch something on a, I get a hook, set a hook on a jerk bait, I'm like 50-50, this is gonna make it. If it's big, it's, you know, 80-20 that I'm gonna lose it kind of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, jerk baits are that's very, to on a river, on a striper, that's,
Yeah.
I mean, it's exciting though. It'll make you a better angler. It'll make you or break you, I'll say that.
Yeah. A lot of guys on the river love the jerk bait in my area. It's definitely more of a finesse approach.
Yeah.
And I mean, you're throwing it in more of the spots that's kind of safer, not against the actual laydowns. But the river fish like it, man. I mean, it's lightweight line. It's a battle. It's fun.
Yeah, I know it is. It's you just have to be very, very aware that you just set a hook on a jerk bait and not a jig.
Yes.
Because you'll forget that real quick.
Yeah.
You'll forget it real quick. I got my boy Brandon. Brandon, hey, I hope Anna's doing well. I know she went through surgery, so my good friend Brandon is here. What's your favorite size? No, I'm sorry. Yeah, favorite size swim bait to throw on the river. So you have a specific side that you like, your sweet spot that you want to throw?
I love probably like an 8-inch swim bait. That's probably my favorite. Just for me, I've been doing it for a little bit longer, but yeah, that's my sweet spot, man. Because I don't outsize numbers. I can still catch 3 to 4 fish on a river trip on a glad bait that size. If I go to something like the 9 or 10-inch, I'm going for like one fish in like 10 hours, and that's hit or miss, man. But anything between, honestly, for most people, I would say a 6 or 7, like these two.
That's the funky color that I saw on you.
That's the crazy color.
You know, that goes really completely against what everybody always says, like, and I think it's kind of overrated. Like match the hatch. Yeah, you kind of match the hatch, but like we were talking about it, I think it was the last episode that I did. I was talking like there's a reason why, you know, they say like animals with like funky colors, fish or, you know, like albino deer, they don't last a lot in the wildlife, is because predators can spot them easily. So
Yep.
you throw a bright, people think like, oh, that's a bright color. Fish are not used to seeing that. That's because any fish that has that anomaly is going to get eaten way before he can get to adulthood. So it works sometimes. Anything that's more visible is like, fish are generally going to try to camouflage in order to not be seen. So when you throw a bait that can very high visibility, then you get I don't want to say get more chances, but you're going to get more attention. Whether fish bite it or not, is there's a lot of factors that go.
Don't get seen. Yep.
Yeah, they'll get seen or followed a lot of times. Is there any color? Is there any bait that you do not recommend for river fishing? And I'll give you an example. I always recommend, people ask me, it's like, hey, creek fishing, I know you do a lot of that. What baits do you use? And I always tell people, do not use a football jig. If you're gonna throw a jig, let it be a flipping jig, something that has like a narrower head so it won't get stuck.
Yep.
Maybe that's the one you were gonna say. I hope not. I hope you had another one. But is there any bait in particular you tell people, hey, stay off of this bait? It's either gonna get snag-a-log or doesn't have the same effect on lakes than it does in river. I'm imagining something like a Dominican rig, but anyways, go ahead.
Probably the lipless crankbait. That's just such a sketchy one to throw on the river.
You can snag a lot.
Yeah, you will. You don't have a bill to protect it like a square bill. I mean, so the odds of you snagging it are super high. Yeah.
You're gonna lose a lot of time, especially like if you find like a juice where it's like, all right, there's some laydowns over there. There should be bass sitting there and you throw a lipless crankbait, it gets snagged. Two choices: you either go get it and you're gonna scare every single fish that was there and forget
Yeah.
about that spot, or
Yeah.
just cut the line and lose it and
Mhm.
don't throw it again.
That's true. And some spots, I hate to say it, on the river, if you throw your bait in there, it's a chance you may not get it back due to
Yeah,
current. Sometimes it's just not safe in certain areas to go and get a bait. I hate to say it. You can put yourself in a situation to where, like, all right, you got like overhangs, a lay down, and heavy current. If you throw in there and it gets stuck, you might just want to leave it there because
yeah,
it's safe.
yeah. And I think that's another thing I've hear people talk about this all. I think Bass Thumb AI. I'll try to find. Oh, I think he mentioned it. Like when he goes on rivers, it's like bring your cheap stuff, bring your like cheap rods and reels, something that you are willing to lose. And I think that applies to baits. Like for example, if you know you're gonna fish river that has a lot
Mhm.
of a current, don't bring your very expensive glide baits or anything that has a treble hook that you don't want to lose. Like buy an off brand and maybe switch the hooks out if you don't trust the hooks.
Mhm.
But you know, don't throw a $50 glide bait or swim bait on the river. I mean, depending on what you like, how much are you willing
How
to
much
lose
you
this
willing to
bait?
lose it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, if you're gonna throw a jerk bait, don't throw that Vision 110.
It's
That might
expensive.
not be. Go with something. Go with the H2O X from Academy.
Yeah.
Bass Thumb AI says, "What is the size of fish you are catching on those glide baits?" So black bass, he's talking about. So generally, what do you expect? Like, what would you be like? All right, if I'm throwing this is the smallest I consider myself successful.
Successful.
Like worth,
At
I guess,
least seven.
throwing it.
At least 17 inches to 18 inches.
Mhm.
Yep. I mean, because
We're talking about smallmouth because relative, right? Smallmouth about 17-inch is huge. Largemouth
um,
about 17 inch is normal. But we're
spots
talking
like
about spot or
spotted bass, joe bass, like largies. I mean, the rivers don't get huge.
yeah,
I mean, the fish don't get huge on my river. I mean, but a 19-inch to 20-inch spotted bass, like that's a good sized river fish, or a shoalie or like a smallie. So that's the goal. When I'm throwing these at like at least 18, 19, and 20 is that's a big fish on the river. But man, I will get like 14-inch fish and 13-inch fish,
they'll
bite.
bite it out just being
Yeah,
territorial.
yeah.
Well, let me ask you this because I want people to have realistic expectations with swim baits.
Hmm.
Like we all see the reels, you, Manny Varela, and all that catching giant homeless fishermen down there in
Hmm.
Austin. He throws swim baits all the time, and he's catching those 8-10 pounders. Manny, the same thing, caught some big old bass. You do some of all you guys out there throwing swim baits on rivers. Realistically, if even at your best, how many fish do you expect to catch if you're going to be out there 8 to 10 hours throwing a swim bait
Yeah.
compared to like a chatterbait or a jig or whatever other bait
Hmm.
that catches a lot of fish?
And I'll be transparent with you. You know, I've been fishing for a while, so a lot of times I will take a jig and I'll take, like, say for instance, like a chopo. But if I'm primarily fishing the swim bait, a good day is probably 3 to 4 fish. That's a good day on a 10-hour float. It has been days when I got 9, 10 fish on a swim bait. But also don't be surprised if you get 2 bites.
Yeah.
I mean, you realistically 3 to 4 is a good day. And then also with me, I kind of know what areas to target. Whether it's a cutout on the bank, a lay down, and you really, I hate to say it, I mean, you really have to be willing to throw this right up next to a lay down, and it get hung up, and you got to paddle over to get it. Because if you're not putting it in those areas, I hate to say it, you're probably not going to catch the fish.
And that's a good point that I want to touch on because I think it all is relative to how much river fishing you're going to do. Like for example, if you are there's not a lot of rivers where you live, and you're gonna make a 5 hour trip,
Hmm.
and you're not familiar with not you, but just in general, people are watching, listen. It's
Yep.
like, hey, my closest river where I can actually fish is like 5 hours, and I'm not that all familiar with river fishing. If you're gonna imitate Eric, Manny, all those social media that are catching giants on swim baits, you're gonna be disappointed because, like you mentioned, it's one thing to know how to catch fish. It's another thing, how do you utilize your kayak on the river? So if you're not familiar with it, you have to, you want to get the best out of that 1 day trip that you may
Yep.
only do a few times or maybe once a year. And if you're complicating by throwing a big swim bait with treble hooks, you're not going to want to do this again. By next week, all your gear and kayak going to be in Facebook Marketplace. So I
Yep.
think people need to understand, if if that's your plan, hey, I don't have rivers and I only get this shot and maybe once or twice a year, and I'm gonna have to invest Airbnbs and all that. Throw something that it's not gonna get prone to snag. Avoid treble hooks. Throw something that you're familiar with. So something that's gonna work. So something that's gonna catch 20 bass. I mean, at its best, and maybe there's going to be a lot of small of them and a couple of big ones, but something you're going to have fun. I think
Yep.
when you're going to start throwing, like, hey, I'm going to throw swim baits. The difference between Eric, Manny, and me and the rest of you that are not familiar with river fishing, like I am not, is that you guys know what you're doing. You've went through the grind. You've embraced the grind, and you decided, I'm gonna see this through for better and worse, and I'm gonna be, it's gonna hurt the first few times, but eventually I'll get to where I want to go. So
Yep.
you have to be realistic for those that are watching, listening. What is your plan? Are you going to be planning on going river fishing long? Do you have access to river fishing? Are you willing to put up with the grind of a lot of days just getting skunk, losing swim baits because they're not cheap?
Yep.
Um, and work yourself to the point where Eric and you and Eric, Manny, and all of you guys are. If not, then go out there and throw something that you feel comfortable you catching, and it's going to be less prone to get a snag.
Mhm. And another thing, you can go out there and if start with something you're comfortable with for the first hour or two, catch you a couple fish, and then it's like, all right, well, I caught my fish. Now let's double down and try to make it work with the swim bait.
Yeah, that's true. All right, Bass Thumbs AI says, because of the show, do you have a preferred beer to take on river trips and make the time go faster between a handful of fish? That's a good question.
That is a good question. Preferred beer. I like Coronas a lot. Modelo. Uh, this is a local one I have right here. It's Creature Comforts. I live close to Athens, Georgia, so it's a local brewery. So I do like beer. Yeah.
Awesome, man. Yeah, I mentioned it on the last show, but when it comes to winter, I like drinking stout. Getting
Oh,
stout.
nice.
But if it's summer, I like a blonde or a lager. But
Yeah, yeah.
I have to say this on the podcast. Please drink responsibly, especially if you're going to be on the river and having a couple of
Absolutely.
beers. Please drink responsible. Know your limit.
Yes.
The last thing I want to do is seeing anybody get hurt. Another thing, going back to safety before I let you go, because I know I've had you for an hour and 23 minutes and you're in East Coast, so it's a lot later for you, or at least an hour later from you. When it comes to winter, like, what is there any gear that you recommend for, like, hey, if you get stranded, you
Mhm.
need to have, I know some guys take like this metallic style blanket to cover themselves. I forgot the name of it. It's more like a solar blanket, it's what they call it, or
Okay.
stuff like that. Is there anything that you say, hey, to battle, to avoid, because you're very prone to getting, flipping over in cold water? Is
Right.
there something that you recommend that people should be taking to avoid hypothermia when you're out on the river?
Yeah, and just even before that point, hopefully you don't flip in the river, but it could happen. Don't wear cotton. Cotton like zaps
Yes.
and it gets super heavy. You want to layer up, kind of wear like a base layer. Wool works extremely well. Even when it's wet, sometimes it still can hold on to heat. Excuse me. Far as boots, I'm not sponsored by NRS, but the NRS, the boundary boots work really good just to kind of keep your feet somewhat dry. But definitely wear layers so you can take those off if it gets hot. Other thing is have a dry bag with clean clothes. The last thing you want to do is capsize or flip, and you have to paddle out freezing, and you get hypothermic. So take a dry bag with clean clothes. That way you can change out and get out of those cold clothes. Take a whistle that you can blow on just in case something really bad happens. That's probably some of the more important things I would say, as far as wintertime fishing.
Do you take anything like waterproof matches or something to like create heat? Let's say you're stranded and there's a possibility of you staying overnight. I know I mentioned it again, but do you take anything like those? I keep forgetting. Is it solar blankets? I know I've had it when I went to hiking with my friends in Colorado once, where I'm like, what is this metal? Huge aluminum piece of aluminum foil. It's like, no, it's a hydro blanket. So you cover yourself and gives you heat and kind of holds your body heat. Do you take any other things like that people wouldn't generally think of first, like survivor stuff?
Yeah, I have like the Yaga Tank like first aid kit that has most of the supplies. I'm working on getting some of the more advanced stuff like the techniques you're talking about as well. This is an odd one that I take, man. Like the metal cutters, just in case if you happen to get a hook in your hand.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah, like that's something that definitely happens with kayak fishing. You're always moving. If you have a fish jump around in your lap, or hopefully you can do the braid trick, and you don't have to try to push a hook through. But it's hard to paddle back with a hook in your hand.
Dude, I've shout out to Jeremy McCormick, who's usually watching at this time. Maybe he's watching, maybe he's not, or maybe he's listening. But we were fishing on the Possum Kingdom, and right as we were getting off, he grabbed his bait and rod. And thankfully, we're already at the boat ramp, but his like a treble hook the bar went through it. So we were afraid of doing that whole. I had never done that thing with the braid, the call. So we found like the wire cutters that he had, and we cut it, and it was like, golly, like I need to get one. And I finally did get some wire cutters on my kayak, and I hope I never have to use them. But yeah, mini bolt cutters, what Brandon calls it, that is definitely something that people don't think about, because if you're on the lake, it's different. But if you're on the river where you have to battle the elements,
yes,
it's like you said, it's hard to paddle with a treble hook, and even the split ring,
the separators,
the spring separator. Because if you have like you have a big swim bait, you can use the split ring separators to at least get the bait out, and even if you have to. Wait till you get somewhere to cut to get that out. It's not a matter of if, it's when. Yeah, it is. It definitely is.
That's right.
What haven't covered that we want to talk about? And before I let you go, I need you to, or I would love you if you want to plug in your sponsors and where can people follow you and all that.
Yeah, you can follow me at Atypical Outdoors on YouTube, Instagram, also Facebook. And also my ebook is atypicaloutdoors.net.
And I did buy it, and I didn't ask for a freebie because I like supporting the people that support my channel, either by following or being my guest, which Eric so kindly is giving the honors of it. And I can't share the screen because I have it on my iPad, but I will say I really like it. It's kind of like not a short read, but short and concise. So I really enjoy it. And where can people? I bought it through just the link on your Instagram, but somebody wants to buy it. That's the easiest way.
Yeah, probably link in my bio on Instagram, or just go to atypicaloutdoors.net.
Cool. All right, perfect. All right, if there's no more questions from our people that are watching or listening, I'll let you go. Like I mentioned, I know it's kind of late for you, a little bit later than it is for me. Eric, thank you so much for coming to the podcast, man. Like I said, I truly love what you're doing with your social media. I love the whole how you bring the experience of river fishing to your social media and kind of let us experience it with you. I think your content is genuine. I think your content is awesome, and it really highlights the cool thing about river fishing that gets other people into this. So I appreciate it. Thank you for making the time to come up to the podcast.
Thank you. I appreciate the invite.
And for those that are watching or listening, again, I always stress this before I let everybody go. Please wear your PFDs, especially if you're going to be on the river. I know in most states you're not obligated to wear your PFDs, and I don't mean to tell you what to do, but please, please.
Yeah.
Last year was crazy amount of people. The one is too many, but last year I think we had like a half a dozen people that were out either on tournaments or uh, just having fishing out of the kayak that tragically made the news and became a statistic. And I hate to see anybody, much less somebody that supports my channel and supports my podcast, to go through that. So wear your PFDs, please. It is
Yes.
such an important thing. Even if the law doesn't obligate you to wear it, just wear it, man. Never know what's gonna happen. It's things happen, and especially on our rivers that you don't expect, and it's usually those are the ones that make the news. The one that didn't wear it because it's been doing this for 20 years and never thought this was gonna happen. So I don't care if you're in a Titan X, you can flip. Whether Crescent Shoaley or RVR, things happen. Nobody can predict weather. So yeah. For those again follow watching us, you can follow us on Bass Kayak and Beers YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. And thank you for supporting the channel. And I'll let everybody go. Have a great night. Peace out.